Hi, everyone. Today we have an easy story to help you practice English. Let's begin.
Lila was a young woman, about 18 years old. She had long, dark, wavy hair that she often tied back with a simple ribbon, and big, brown eyes that held a gentle sadness. She lived in a small, crowded apartment in a big, noisy city. The buildings were tall, and the streets were always full of cars and people. Lila's family was very poor. Her mother had passed away when Lila was little, so she lived with her father, Marcus. Marcus was not a good man. He was in his mid-40s, with thinning, messy hair and a scruffy beard. He often wore old, stained clothes. He didn't like to work. Instead, he would often take the little money Lila earned from mending clothes for neighbors. He would use it to buy drinks for himself and his lazy friends. Lila dreamed of a better life, a life where she could go to school or even just have enough food every day without worrying. But with her father around, it felt impossible. One evening, Marcus came home looking strangely pleased with himself. "Lila!" he called out, his voice louder than usual. "I have wonderful news. I have found a way for us to get a lot of money." Lila felt a knot of fear in her stomach. Her father's wonderful news usually meant trouble for her. "What is it, father?" she asked quietly. "I have arranged a marriage for you," he announced, a greedy glint in his eyes. "Marry? But father, I don't even know him. Who is he?" Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "That doesn't matter. He's a bit older, but he has money. That's all that matters. You will do as I say."
Lila cried that night. She didn't want to marry a stranger, especially one her father had chosen only for money. She imagined an old, unkind man. But she knew her father. When Marcus made up his mind, especially when money was involved, there was no changing it. He would become angry and cruel if she refused. The next day, Marcus told Lila to wear her best dress. It wasn't much, just a faded blue dress that she had tried to keep clean. He even gave her a small, wilted flower to put in her hair. "The man's representative is coming today to finalize things," he said, rubbing his hands together. Soon, there was a knock on the door. A stern-looking man in a neat, dark suit entered their small apartment. He looked around with a serious expression. Lila stood by the wall, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes looking at the floor. She felt so small and scared. Marcus was all smiles. "Welcome, welcome. This is my daughter Lila," he said, pushing Lila forward a little. The man in the suit only nodded at Lila, then turned to Marcus. They talked in low voices for a few minutes. Lila heard words like agreement and payment. Then the man handed Marcus a small, heavy bag. Marcus quickly snatched it, his eyes wide with greed. "It is done," the man in the suit said. "She will be collected tomorrow morning." Lila wanted to scream, to run away, but her feet felt like lead. Her father was selling her, like she was an object, not a person. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she tried hard not to let them fall in front of these men. Once the representative left, Marcus started counting the money, a happy grin on his face, not even looking at his heartbroken daughter. The next morning came too soon. Lila had barely slept. She packed her few belongings into a small, worn bag. Her father didn't even say goodbye properly. He was too busy thinking about his new money. A simple, clean car arrived, not fancy, but much nicer than anything Lila had ever been in. The same stern-faced man from yesterday opened the door for her. Lila sat silently in the back seat as the car drove away from the noisy city streets she knew. They drove for quite some time, and the buildings started to get smaller and further apart. Soon, they were in a quieter, greener part of the city, with nice houses and trees. Lila wondered where she was being taken. She was so nervous. Finally, the car stopped in front of a beautiful, medium-sized house. It wasn't a giant palace, but it was lovely, with a neat garden and freshly painted walls. It looked welcoming. The stern man led her to the front door and knocked. The door opened, and Lila braced herself to meet the old, unpleasant man her father had described. But the man who opened the door was not old or unpleasant at all. He was young, perhaps in his early 30s, with kind, warm blue eyes and neatly styled dark hair. He was handsome and wore smart, comfortable clothes. He looked at Lila with a gentle smile. "Hello," he said, his voice soft and friendly. "You must be Lila. I am Ethan. Please come in." Lila was so surprised she could barely speak. This couldn't be the man her father sold her to, could he? He seemed nice. Lila stepped inside. The house was even lovelier on the inside, bright, clean, and filled with comfortable furniture and books. It felt like a real home. Ethan was very kind to her. He showed her to a beautiful room that would be hers. It had a soft bed and a window that looked out onto the garden. "I know this is all very sudden and strange for you," Ethan said gently. "My representative, Mr. Henderson, handles many of my family's affairs. I am afraid your father might have misrepresented the situation to you. He was in financial trouble, and this was his proposed solution." Lila slowly began to understand. Ethan wasn't a cruel man who had bought a wife. He was wealthy, yes, but he also seemed to be a good person. Over the next few days, Ethan was patient and understanding. He never forced Lila to do anything. They talked. Lila, shyly at first, told him about her life, but not too much about her father's worst actions yet. Ethan listened with sympathy. He told her about his work. He owned a successful company that designed software, and his love for reading and gardening. Lila started to feel safe with Ethan. He bought her new clothes, much nicer than anything she had ever owned, but simple and elegant, just like her taste. He encouraged her to read books from his library. She started to smile more. Her big brown eyes began to lose their sadness and sparkle with a little happiness. She found herself enjoying Ethan's company. He was not just handsome and rich, he was truly kind and respectful. Lila realized, with a flutter in her heart, that she was starting to like him very much, and she saw a warmth in his eyes when he looked at her too. One evening, after they had shared a pleasant dinner, Lila felt brave enough to tell Ethan everything about her father, how he never worked, how he took her money, and how he had sold her without a care for her feelings, just for his own greed. Ethan listened patiently, his expression growing serious. When Lila finished, her eyes filled with tears, he reached across the table and gently took her hand. "Lila," he said, his voice firm but kind, "what your father did was wrong, very wrong. He should not be allowed to treat anyone like that, especially not his own daughter, and he should not benefit from such cruelty." A few days later, Ethan told Lila he had a plan. He arranged for Mr. Henderson, his stern representative, to visit Marcus. This time, Mr. Henderson didn't bring money. He brought evidence of Marcus's neglect and the illegal nature of how he sold his daughter. He explained to Marcus that his actions had serious consequences. Marcus, who had probably already spent most of the money, was shocked and scared. He had thought he had gotten away with it. Mr. Henderson, on Ethan's instructions, made sure that Marcus would face legal trouble for his actions. He wasn't physically harmed, but he lost any respect he might have had, and the authorities would ensure he couldn't harm anyone else in that way again. He would have to find a way to live honestly, without exploiting others. Lila felt a sense of relief, not revenge, but justice. She was free from her father's shadow. With her past settled, Lila could fully embrace her future with Ethan. Their fondness for each other grew into deep love. Ethan asked Lila to marry him, not as part of a deal, but because he truly loved her. And Lila, with a heart full of joy, said yes. They had a beautiful, small wedding in their garden. Lila, no longer the sad, poor girl from the cramped apartment, was a radiant bride. She had found not just a handsome and rich husband, but a kind, loving partner. And together, they built a life filled with happiness, respect, and all the good things she had once only dreamed of.